Everybody laughed at her when she walked in, but Maria James was about to prove them all dead wrong. In the heart of New York City, where ambition fuels every heartbeat and failure waits at every corner, one woman walked quietly into the Jacob K. Javits Convention Center. Her name was Maria James. To the hundreds of people around her, she was just another face in the crowd, another test taker bracing for the most brutal exam of their lives, the New York State Bar. But Maria was not like the others. The lobby buzzed with nervous energy. Men in sharp suits paced the marble floor, clutching expensive coffee in one hand and tablets in the other. Women in tailored blazers whispered about case law, flipping through printed outlines from courses that cost more than Maria's annual rent. The air was thick with confidence, but also arrogance. Maria stood near the back, adjusting the strap of her old backpack. The zipper was broken, the fabric faded. Her blazer, bought from a thrift store, hung a little loose. Instead of sleek binders or a MacBook, she carried a single notebook, dog-eared, stained with coffee, pages nearly falling apart. A tall candidate glanced at her, then whispered to his friend with a smirk, "She doesn't belong here. Maybe she's staff." Another girl, pearls shining on her ears, leaned in. "Probably here for the underdog story. Cute. But this is the bar exam, not a movie." The laughter came sharp, but Maria didn't respond. She walked forward, head held low, and found her seat. What no one there knew was the weight of the road she had traveled, just to sit in that chair. Her journey began years ago, in the South Bronx. She grew up in a cramped, two-room apartment above a laundromat. The smell of detergent and bleach clung to the walls, and the sound of washing machines, running late into the night, was the lullaby of her childhood. Her father worked construction, strong hands, broad shoulders, and a laugh that filled their tiny kitchen. But when Maria was just 10, an accident at the site took him from her forever. From that day, life became a different kind of fight. Her mother, Angela, carried the family on her back. She worked as a home health aide, moving from one apartment to the next, caring for strangers while her own body began to wear down. Long hours left her knees swollen and her eyes heavy, but no matter how late she came home, she always asked the same question. "Maria, did you finish your homework?" It was never about the grades. It was about survival. Angela believed education was the only weapon her daughter would have against a world that had already taken too much from them. By 16, Maria was working 2 jobs while finishing high school. Nights at a Harlem diner, pouring coffee for customers who never looked her in the eye. Early mornings at Walgreens, stocking shelves before dawn. And on weekends, she vacuumed the offices of midtown law firms, her reflection caught in the shine of mahogany desks where diplomas hung proudly on the walls. She cleaned the rooms where her future was supposed to be built. Sometimes she skipped meals so her mother could eat. Sometimes she studied on the subway, casebooks sliding from her tired hands as she dozed off between stops. More than once, she walked into an exam on nothing but caffeine and 2 hours of sleep. But she never complained. She carried a promise deep inside her, one she whispered whenever she saw her mother limping home from work, too tired to even change out of her uniform. "One day, Mom. One day I'll pass the bar exam. And when I do, you'll never work another shift again." It was the promise that kept her alive. Law school wasn't handed to Maria. She applied to program after program, rejection after rejection. But persistence was her only luxury, and she refused to give it up. Finally, one letter came through, an acceptance from CUNY School of Law. It wasn't the Ivy League. It wasn't prestige. But it was her way in. While her classmates interned at corporate firms, Maria was working nights and weekends just to pay tuition. While others spent thousands on prep courses, Maria built her own outlines from used books and online scraps. Page after page, she filled notebooks with cramped handwriting, rewriting the law until her fingers ached. She didn't just study, she survived. And now, after years of sacrifice, she sat in that cavernous exam hall, under fluorescent lights that hummed like a warning. Desks stretched for miles, each one a battlefield. Proctors moved down the aisles, their footsteps echoing like guards on watch. The silence before the storm was heavy. The woman next to Maria glanced at her battered notebook and smirked. "You actually wrote your outlines by hand? Couldn't afford prep classes, huh?" Maria didn't answer. She ran her hand across the notebook's cover, the same one that had absorbed her tears on nights when failure felt certain. The same one that held every ounce of her determination. The loudspeaker crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen, the New York State Bar exam begins in 15 minutes. Please prepare your materials." Some closed their eyes to steady their breath. Others scribbled last-minute notes, flipping flashcards like gamblers at a poker table. A few whispered prayers into their sleeves. Maria sat still. Her mind drifted back through the years. The funeral where she promised her father she'd take care of her mother. The endless shifts at the diner. The sound of her mother's voice asking if she'd finished her homework. The nights where her only study lamp was the flickering bulb in the kitchen. This exam wasn't just a test. It was every sacrifice, every humiliation, every late-night tear turned into ink on a page. The proctor's voice cut the silence. "You may now begin." Maria picked up her pen and started to write. Maria's pen moved across the paper with quiet precision. Around her, the room filled with the scratching of pens, the clicking of keyboards, the shallow breaths of hundreds of hopefuls chasing the same dream. But while others raced, Maria wrote with a steadiness that came only from years of hardship. She wasn't here to impress. She was here to survive. Hours passed. The exam drained everyone like a marathon. Some candidates slumped in their chairs, staring blankly at questions they couldn't untangle. Others chewed nervously on pens, whispering to themselves as if the law would suddenly answer back. A few gave up entirely, heads resting on desks in silent defeat. Maria kept going. Her hand cramped, but she didn't stop. Every stroke of her pen carried her mother's voice. Every paragraph reminded her of nights spent under flickering lights, fighting exhaustion just to learn one more rule, one more principle. This was not just law, it was her life. When the proctor finally called time, pens dropped, keyboards went still, and a wave of exhaustion swept through the hall. Some students leaned back in relief, convinced they had conquered the impossible. Others walked out shaking their heads, already mourning their failure. Maria sat for a moment longer, her hand trembling. Then she closed her notebook, lifted her bag, and walked out into the cold New York afternoon. On the subway ride home, she replayed every question, every answer, second-guessing herself until her chest felt heavy. But when she stepped into her apartment, the sound of her mother's soft voice brought her back. "How was it, baby?" Angela asked, her apron still tied around her waist after another long shift. Her hands were swollen from lifting patients, but she smiled anyway. Maria forced a nod. "It was hard, but I did my best." Her mother reached out, brushing her daughter's cheek with tired fingers. "That's all you've ever done. Your best. And one day, it will be enough." Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Life went back to its routine of long shifts and late nights. The results would not be released until summer, and the waiting became its own kind of torture. Every time her phone buzzed, Maria's chest tightened. Every time she checked her email, she braced herself for heartbreak. The city around her didn't slow down. Yellow cabs honked, Wall Street traders shouted into their phones, and students in Midtown carried books she couldn't afford. Maria kept working at the diner, pouring coffee for customers who would never know she was more than just a waitress. She cleaned law offices on weekends, her reflection glimmering in polished conference tables where partners argued about cases she longed to fight herself. But late at night, when the world was finally quiet, Maria whispered the same promise into the darkness. One day, Mom. One day soon. Then, one hot July afternoon, the email arrived. She stared at her phone, her hands trembling so hard she could barely tap the screen. Her mother sat across the table, folding laundry, unaware of the storm building in her daughter's chest. Maria opened the message. Her eyes darted across the words, and then she froze. Congratulations. We are pleased to inform you that you have passed the New York State Bar examination. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. The room blurred, her vision swimming with tears. Then she let out a sound, half laugh, half sob, as the phone slipped from her hand. Her mother looked up sharply. Maria, what happened? Maria's voice broke. Mom, I passed the bar. Angela dropped the shirt in her hands and rushed forward, wrapping her daughter in an embrace that seemed to hold all the years of struggle, all the nights of sacrifice. For the first time in a long time, Maria let herself cry, not from pain, but from the overwhelming relief of victory. Word spread quickly. The same classmates who had once laughed at her thrift store blazer now sent her polite messages, forced congratulations, hollow smiles. Some avoided her entirely, embarrassed by their cruelty. But Maria didn't care about them. She cared only about the woman who had stood by her side through every storm. A few months later, Maria walked across a stage in a black robe, her name echoing through the auditorium as she was sworn in as an attorney. Her mother sat in the front row, tears streaming down her face, clapping harder than anyone else in the room. When the oath ended, Maria glanced toward the crowd, her eyes finding her mother's. For a brief moment, everything, the laughter, the humiliation, the exhaustion, fell away. All that remained was pride. Later, as Maria stepped out onto the streets of Manhattan, people in suits hurried past her, too caught up in their own lives to notice the quiet triumph walking among them. But Maria didn't need their recognition. She had something greater. The city lights reflected off the Hudson as she stood at the edge of the water, breathing in the night air. The skyline glittered, bold and untouchable, but for the first time, Maria felt like she belonged to it. She wasn't just a waitress. She wasn't just the janitor's daughter. She was an attorney, licensed in the state of New York. The same girl who once studied by subway lights, who scrubbed conference room floors, who endured laughter and whispers, had now conquered one of the hardest exams in the country. The world had doubted her. Strangers had mocked her. Yet Maria James had proven them all wrong. She gazed up at the stars, hidden behind the towering skyscrapers, her voice barely above a whisper. We made it, Dad. We finally made it. Her mother's words echoed in her mind, a steady reminder of every sacrifice, every late night, every moment of perseverance. That's all you've ever done, Maria. Your best. And now, your best is enough. And in that quiet, triumphant moment, Maria knew the truth. Hard work, resilience, and unwavering determination always find a way. So the next time you see someone struggling, remember, every person has a story you haven't lived. Every battle is unseen. Every victory hard-earned. Judge less, empathize more, and never underestimate the power of persistence. If Maria's journey moved you, subscribe for more stories that remind us all. Determination can change everything.